Good afternoon, Earl Haig students, and welcome to the library. I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome everybody to our very first lecture series that we will be hosting in the library this year. So you're a very fortunate group to be here today for the very first lecture series, and we're very, very fortunate to have author Anita Amirrezvani here to speak with us today. So to start off with, we do have 2 copies of her book in our library, and we will also have other copies that will be available for classes to use. So if you're interested, you can come and see us later to sign out those books. And so I'd like you all to give a very big warm welcome to Anita, but before that I'm going to introduce our principal, Ms. Gonzalez, to come up and welcome her to our school.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome Miss Anita Amirrezvani to our school this morning. Whenever we can open up our school and expose our students to the many talented authors and artists, not only in our community but outside of our community, it's a great thing. Miss Amirrezvani is not only an author, but I understand she's a former dance critic who earned a fellowship from the National Arts Journalism Program at Columbia University. She is currently an adjunct professor at the California College of Arts in San Francisco. This afternoon we look forward to hearing about her writings, which include The Blood of Flowers, which was longlisted for the Orange Prize. Congratulations, Orange Prize for Fiction, and her new novel, The Equal of the Sun. So we also look forward to hearing about her own personal experiences and the process of writing. Miss Amirrezvani, I know that our students will not only learn from you this morning, but they will certainly be inspired. Thank you very much for providing this opportunity for our students and for taking time away from your busy schedule to be with us.
Good morning. Can you hear me in the back? Raise your hand if you cannot hear me in the back. Great. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. What I would like to share with you are my 7 tips for becoming a professional writer. I was born in Iran and raised in the United States in the San Francisco area. My first novel came out about, thank you. I forgot how tall I am. So as I was saying, I'm going to offer to you, in case you didn't hear the first time around, 7 tips for becoming a professional writer. The first thing I'd like to start out with is what I like to call the love at first sight moment. Now, we often talk about this in terms of falling in love with a person, and that's not what I'm talking about. That may or may not be a good idea, cases depending, but I think it's a great idea when it comes to finding your topic as a writer. Let me tell you what my own love at first sight moment was in terms of topic. When I was 14, I was in Iran with my father's side of the family, and my father said to me, I tell you what, I have a really busy schedule, but let's do a father-daughter trip together. I'm going to take you to the city of Isfahan, and we'll just spend the weekend there exploring and having a good time. Of course, I said yes. So we went to this city, which is actually a historic capital of Iran, and it was just the 2 of us wandering around. I got off the plane, and we went straight to one of the most famous sites in Iran, which was known as the Image of the World Square. This is an enormous square that was built in the 17th century. And it's so big, actually, that they used to play polo there on horses. And now you see these really beautiful historic buildings, an old palace, the mosque that the Shah used for his private worship, and then a public mosque is also there, as well as an entrance to a bazaar where you can find all kinds of good stuff even today. So we wandered around there together for a period of about 2 days, and I remember being so enraptured by the sights of everything there. The Iranian carpets in the marketplace, the food we ate together, the incredible tile work. Something got stirred inside of me. I would have to say that that was my love at first sight moment in terms of topic. I think my father is actually very crafty. as your parents probably are as well. He doesn't tell me exactly why he's doing things all the time, but I think he knew he was basically planting a seed really deep in my heart, and that seed would make me, many years later, do a lot of research into the historic city of Isfahan, and in fact, set my first novel, The Blood of Flowers, in that very city, and in fact, write about the process of making Persian carpets by hand. One thing led to the other, and it was all the result of this very formative trip I took at the age of 14. So I say to you, look for those moments of love at first sight with topics. And when you find them, and perhaps you already have, when you find them, be sure to plumb the depths of those topics, because that's a signal to you that you found something of meaning for yourself, for your life, and for your future. Here's tip number 2 for aspiring writers. Be sure to do your research, and this is for fiction or nonfiction. Now, I know your teachers are always telling you this, but actually, I might have a slightly different angle on it for you. I say do your research because doing your research allows you to be original. And original is something that's really useful when you're a writer. Let me give you an example of how this applied to my own life. I was writing my first novel, The Blood of Flowers, for a long time, and I had no idea if I would ever get it published, as most first-time novelists really never know. I thought my topic was a little strange. Here I was setting this book in 17th century Iran, writing about things that most people, at least in the United States, probably never think about, that era, those politics, how you make Persian carpets, etc. I thought I was kind of crazy, but I did it anyway because I had had that moment of falling in love with the topic, and because it's just what I needed to write for whatever reason. I had no idea if I'd have any interest from publishers, but lo and behold, when the book was finally finished, after 9 years, and my agent was sending it around to publishers, I had a chance to talk to some of the editors who were interested in possibly publishing the book. And I said to them, why are you interested in this book? Even I think the topic might be unusual. The editors all said to me, we're interested in this book partly because we've never seen anything on this topic before in fiction. So they had seen a lot of books about modern Iran, about the Iranian Revolution in 1979. They'd seen a lot of modern things, but nothing in this period. So in this particular instance, doing my research, plumbing the depths of the 17th century, turned out to be a strong point. And it actually turned out to be one of the reasons that I was able to publish my first book. My third tip for you is to let your inner conflicts be your strengths as a writer. Let your inner conflicts be your strengths. That may sound really strange also at first go, but what I mean is this. Many of us have really unusual backgrounds. I'm Iranian, Lithuanian, American. I come from a divorced family. Parents divorced when I was 2 years old. I came of age at a time when the US, the United States, and Iran were actually on friendly terms. And then when I was a teenager, they actually became on unfriendly terms, and they've been that way for more than 30 years now, more or less. So I've had a lot of conflict in my family experience, in the political experience, in the countries that I'm part of. And these conflicts can throw a person. They can really cause you a lot of inner conflict. Many of you perhaps are in that situation as well. You may come from different kinds of ethnic backgrounds or different situations. You may have things in your life that you feel are a source of conflict or maybe even a problem. But here's the strange and wonderful thing. You can drop your water and recover. That's strange and wonderful. But the strange and wonderful thing about conflicts is that for writers, they often prove to be a source of great strength. So for me, drawing on my Iranian background and on all the contradictions and confusions of the history between the US and Iran during the past 30 years, of all the changes in my own family life and of just this incredible richness developed for me as a writer. And though I don't actually write about my own family in my fiction, all of these things were a wellspring and a source of creativity for me. So think about it this way. You may have inner conflicts or inner problems. Can you, as a writer, turn those into your strengths? And when you write about those things, write about them with a depth and a meaning that others can't because they don't have your experience. Here's tip number 4. Work your writing muscle. I like to think of myself as an athlete in a strange kind of way. Now, we all would expect that anybody who is an actual athlete competing in sports would spend a lot of time in the gym or with the trainer perfecting his or her craft of whatever it is, whatever sport it is, becoming better and better. We never expect anybody to win a marathon without doing a lot of training or any other kind of sporting event. And the same is true for writing. I really believe you need to work your writing muscle. When you work your writing muscle, you make it stronger. The more you write and the more you think about writing and about improving your writing, the more you make it possible for you to produce excellent work, whether fiction or nonfiction. The example from my own life is this. I worked as a journalist for many years, 10 years as a dance critic, writing about dance in the San Francisco Bay Area, which, by the way, is a job that I really loved. And I know you have an excellent dance program here, and that some of you here in this room perhaps are studying to be dancers. All that writing was really good training for writing fiction, but it wasn't enough. Even after 10 years of writing as a dance critic, I still needed to work on my first book, The Blood of Flowers, for 9 years before it actually got accepted for publication. There were times during those 9 years where I thought, I'm not going to make it. I just won't be able to get to the end of this project. There were low moments, there were high moments. But I think one of the key points about becoming a writer is this issue of training and perseverance. Keep going, keep at it, learn from criticism that you get, integrate it, improve your work, because that's really the only way to become a writer, just as training is the only way to become a successful athlete or dancer. Work your writing muscle for best success. Here's a 5th tip for you, aspiring writers. And again, this may seem a little bit off the beaten path, but I think it's really important. And it's this: learn to manage your mind. Learn to manage your mind. What do I mean by that? Do any of you ever have this syndrome that I would like to call the I'm terrible, I'm wonderful syndrome? One day you might think, oh, my work is good. I really nailed that. That paper was excellent. Piece of art was very good. Another day it might be, I'm really bad. My work is not good. I didn't achieve what I was trying to achieve here. A lot of writers that I know have one or both of these spectrums of reaction. And this is what I call the mind problem, where when you're really trying to be a successful artist, you need to work with your ups and downs. You need to know that as an artist, you may have moments of great inspiration, excitement, connection to your work, this wonderful feeling that's been described as flow, where it feels like your work is coming out so beautifully, so meaningfully. But then again, you may have those other moments. You may have those days and days where you sit in your seat and nothing's coming out correctly and you don't like what you produce, etc. Well, here's the thing. Both those experiences, I think, are really common and really necessary to the process of producing good writing or good art of any kind. Most artists go through these poles, and so it's really a question not of avoiding the bad moments. It's really a question of harnessing all the moments and working with your own internal psyche so that, say, you have a bad day with your work. Thank you. Say you have a bad day with your work. You pause. You say, okay, It's a bad day, but perhaps, but in some ways, this is freeing me up to get to the material or the stuff that really counts, and I'll get to it the next time or the next time. So let yourself have that experience. Let yourself do what I like to call riding the waves. Ride the waves of your experience, whether it's positive or negative with your work. And this is really important so that, say, if you're producing a novel or an extended piece of writing, it doesn't end up in your drawer. You don't just give up and stick it there, because so much of this process is about perseverance. So much is about sticking to it, continuing to do it, and eventually succeeding. Another tip for you is to learn what works for you as a writer. So this is tip number 6. Learn what works for you as a writer. So some people do best with 15-minute bursts of inspiration. They create for a short, really intense period of time, and that's it. Other people do best plodding through. And I have to say, I am a plodder. I plod and plod and plod. I really believe in the, put myself in the chair for many hours. That's the way I produce work. Other people do great on deadline. They stay up half the night, they produce material, they need the deadline in order to get the work out of themselves. Harness what works best for you as an artist or a writer, or really in almost all aspects of life. But that's not to say that you don't get rid of your bad habits if they're not working for you. So say you're a person who stays up half the night to produce a paper, but it's really not your best work because you were tired and you weren't focused, etc., then I don't recommend that. I recommend harnessing the techniques that really work for you in your writing or your artwork and using them and knowing what works for you and making yourself get rid of the bad habits. And the last thing I want to say is, tip number 7, is in your creative work, share the depths of your soul. Don't be afraid to share the depths of your soul. Emily Dickinson says, tell the truth, but tell it slant. And I really love that particular quote. Plumb your own truths. Say something meaningful to the world. Offer yourself. And remember this, that only you have your particular genetic makeup, your particular background, your particular experiences of life, your particular slant on things, your particular way of viewing things. Only you can produce your creative work. If you don't do it, who will? So please do it, because only you can. So these are my 7 tips for you for thinking about being a successful writer. And at this point, I want to open it up to your questions and your thoughts, your experiences. I often find that this part of my talks is always the most fun because we have a dialogue together, and I can offer specific thoughts or advice if you like. So please feel free to ask any questions you want. And I also want to say, I know that Toronto has a very large Iranian community. I think it's the 2nd biggest in North America, if I'm not mistaken. So to all of the Iranians here, I would like to say salam, and thank you for coming. Yes. So what advice for students who want somebody to edit their work? Often in the professional writing world, it's done as a matter of trade. So I myself am in a writing group, and we meet once every 2 weeks over dinner because we all like to eat. And we submit about 20 pages of work in advance of our dinner, and we all read and critique and edit the work in advance, and then we meet and all talk about it. So I really recommend forming affinity groups with people that you like and whose opinion you trust, and asking them for their advice on your work. So this could be either peer feedback, or it could be from people you actually know, or it could also be feedback from people online, because now there are a lot of online interest groups that will do this as well. And I would like to say that on the subject of getting feedback, Another really important thing is being willing to take in some criticism about your work. There's nothing like having a neutral person look at your work and offer you some advice. So for instance, if somebody says to you, and particularly if 2 or 3 people read your work and say to you, I really don't understand the point you're trying to make here, then take that in and see if you can fix whatever it is. Because usually the writer can't see everything or understand everything that needs working through in his or her work, and that's where outside readers come in. And let me just say one other thing to that point is even when you're a professional writer, I have 2 books published now, I still rely greatly on my editor's feedback. I feel that she improves my work tremendously, and I would just be much less of a writer without her and her feedback. And I think most professional writers would admit to that. So part of being a writer and learning to be a writer is really learning to integrate that criticism and use it to make your work as excellent as possible. Yes?
First of all, I'm sort of interested in how you did describe that one period when you were 14. I'm interested in how your particular perspective informed your work, and in particular this new novel. I've read a bit about it. It sounds really interesting. And also, if you could say something about the process of then selecting your main narrator. You've got 2 new novels. What kind of relationship do you establish with the narrator?
Thank you for the question. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big believer in research, not only for originality of your work, but also for finding intriguing subjects. And for my second book, I can tell you that I was reading Iranian court histories that are about that thick, about 1,000 pages long from the period that I work in, 16th, 17th century. And I was reading about battles and all of these things that the Shahs of the period were doing. Rather dry kind of military history and so forth, but all of a sudden I came upon a passage about a woman at court and how she had been very involved in the politics of the day and how she had struggled for power in the politics of the day. Now, I have to tell you that in these Iranian court chronicles, like in most chronicles about previous societies, they primarily focus on the activities and actions of men. So all of a sudden there was this huge long section about a woman's activities in politics, and I immediately sat up and took note. And this is the subject of my current book, Equal of the Sun. It's about an Iranian woman at court who is very well educated and who fought for power, and I had that little love at first sight feeling when I read about her life, because I realized she would be a fascinating subject. Now, to the subject of the narrators of my book, actually she is the main subject of the book, but my narrator is a man, and he is a eunuch. Now, all of you probably know that a eunuch is a castrated male, and as I did research into human history, I started to be reminded of how many societies in human history used eunuchs at their courts or for their administration. So eunuchs were a very common feature. I wouldn't say they were on every street corner, but they were present at the ancient Persian Empire, at the Ottoman court, as well as the Mughal and Byzantine, and of course the Chinese courts. So they were really important to the structure of society. And despite the mutilation they endured in order to take on their positions, they could actually rise up through the ranks of their society, have great power, have great wealth, and really be people of substance and importance. So again, when I found out some of these things about the history of eunuchs, I realized this is a fascinating subject. And this is something that doesn't get written about very much. What would the life of a person like that be? A person who was considered not exactly male, not exactly female, a person who was ungendered and kind of regendered in the definitions of the society of the times. So that was my choice for narrator. And in terms of its connection to today, I think this idea of a person who questions gender issues or is somehow regendered in his society's eyes really speaks to some of the gender questioning we're doing today, and I think at some level, hopefully, the idea that gender doesn't have to be so strictly defined as it has in the past. Did I answer your question? Okay, students, I'd love to hear from some of you. Please give me your questions, your concerns about writing, or your thoughts about how to be a writer, anything I haven't answered. Yes?
When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
When did I know I wanted to be a writer? I knew a long time ago. I would say by the time I was in high school, I knew. For me, though, I wasn't sure how to do it. My route was a little bit, it had a lot of twists and turns, I would say, in it. So I started by being an editor, then I became a journalist, so I moved into journalism, and then I became a fiction writer. And I think at some level to write fiction, I felt like I had to mature into myself as a person to be able to do what I was trying to do, to explore the concepts and ideas and the emotional states of people that I needed and wanted to do. So maybe another thought for you is what you want to explore, and whether you're at a time in your life when you're ready to take on the exploration of things that really matter to you. But I think what my own experience offers, because my first novel wasn't published until I was the extremely ripe old age of 45, I think what my experience offers is that you have time in your life. You can try a lot of different professions. You can write, you can learn, and you can still publish something even when you're older than probably most of your parents. Yeah?
You said it took 9 years to write your novel. What is something that kept motivating you and pushing you to keep going with it and not just dropping your work?
What kept motivating me to keep going through the 9 years that it took to write my novel? It's a very good question. Well, I'm a little bit secretive, first of all. So I would say that for about the first 5 years, I didn't tell anybody I was working on a novel. And it was just a way for me to feel safer with my own work, that I didn't feel I had to share it with anybody until I really felt ready and I felt that I had produced work that was worth sharing. So not everybody's like that. That's just how I happen to be. But what motivated me deeply, I think, is given the difficult situation between the US and Iran for so many years, I was very motivated to write in some ways against the trend. I felt that in the United States, a lot of the media coverage about Iran was really just about politics, and it didn't show the depth of Iranian society the way I knew it to be. Because of course, a society is not just about its politics or about its relationship with another country. A society is also about its people, its customs, its food, etc. So I felt that I knew Iran in these ways. And I also felt that although I wanted to celebrate certain things about Iran, I also had my own critique about Iran and Iranian history. So in the long run, and I think this is true for many artists of all kinds, you keep working because you're really motivated inside yourself to share something that you think is meaningful and that perhaps isn't being shared otherwise. And I think that goes to my earlier point about how you, whatever your individuality is, your unique experiences, allow you to give the world this slant on things that nobody else can. Yes?
Did you ever go back to visit Isfahan after?
I did. I went back to Isfahan twice. The first time was 2000, I believe, the year 2000, and the second time was the year 2004. I really wanted to go back because although I had seen it as a 14-year-old, many years had passed and I wanted to see it again. There's also something about how when you write about a place, just being in the place and feeling the feel of the air on your skin and seeing how the sky looks at a certain time of day, or in the case of Isfahan, which has these beautiful historic bridges with tea houses crossing a very famous river there, to sit there on the banks of the river and have tea is something that you cannot really describe when you, say, look through a book with pictures of a tea house. You have to be there yourself and feel it in order to just get the sensations, the quality of the light, the weather, etc. correctly. So I actually did drag my family there twice. again. And the first time they had no idea why I wanted to go. I didn't tell them I was writing my book because I was in the middle of my 5 years of silence, that period, where I wasn't telling them what I was doing. But the second time they knew. And actually that was good too, because the second time I went, then they were very helpful with getting me to see exactly what I needed to see and telling me relevant stories, some of which I ended up including in my book. Yeah.
Are you still really secretive about your work, or do you actually share with people?
I'm still really secretive about what I write, yes. But I have to qualify that. So I'm in a writing group and I do bring selections of my work to the writing group because I trust these people. They're all professional writers. They know how to comment on work. They know how to tell you what's working and they know how to tell you what's not working in a way that lets you get rid of the bad stuff and really work on the good stuff. So I do share with that group. However, with my second book, Equal of the Sun, which is the one that just came out a few months ago, I have to tell you that nobody read the whole thing until about a year and a half ago at this point. I gave it to my partner to read because I trust him as well. But yes, I'm rather secretive with my work. And let me just tell you the part of the reason so you don't think I'm just completely crazy. Part of the reason is I don't really want people's input except for the input of professionals. So I don't want just, you know, my family or random people just saying they like this or they like that, because I'm not ready for that sort of feedback yet. What I want is a professional view of what's working and what's not, so that I can explore the subjects I think are meaningful, and then eventually I relax and I share it with everybody. And then it doesn't matter what they say. Yeah?
You're talking about how, okay, so your book's about ancient Europe, right?
It's actually, to be honest, I would call it pre-modern, so it's 16th, 17th century where my books are set, whereas I tend to think of ancient Iran as a couple thousand years ago. But in any case, a long time ago, yeah.
But you're also saying you're reflecting on modern day politics of Iran.
It's a good question. So how can I set a book in the past and also reflect on modern day politics? So I'll tell you how. I try to do it by not exploring specifics, because of course in a book set in the 16th century, I can't really explore the specifics of, say, the Islamic Republic's government in Iran. But it is possible, I think, to explore universal themes in your books. And if you think about the books that you've loved that were written in the past, often that's what they do. So universal themes such as justice, such as what makes for a just government, and what doesn't, what is appropriate behavior, what is cruel behavior, things like that. So I think people will be able to read my book and make parallels to now, not just to Iran, but also to other governments and to their choices in terms of how they treat their citizens. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Wait, also is that like subliminally or was it like direct? Like did you like give, like did you direct it, like for it to happen like that, or was it like something you came up along the way of writing?
So you're saying, I think, did I intend that, or was it kind of accidental that I discovered that in the process? That is also a good question, and I think the answer to that is when you're writing an entire book, it's a little bit of both. So I often start from, for instance, with Equal of the Sun, starting out by thinking, I want to explore the life of this princess who fought for power and had this really charged story in her time. But as I go, that's not enough. For me, it's not enough just to tell a simple story. I also want to explore concepts and ideas as I tell the story. So I would say that as I was telling the story, I was coming to the idea that I could also tell a story about justice and lack of justice in the process. So it was a combination. Yeah.
How did you end up publishing? Like, did you submit it to some sort of contest, or did you just bring it in?
How did I end up publishing my book? So I'll start with my first book. You know, the bar is very high for your first novel in particular because you're unproven, right? So of course there's a whole system of agents where you will first need to convince an agent that your book is actually worth reading and worth publishing. And then that agent, hopefully, knows the right publishers to take the book to. Part of the reason you have to do it this way is because most publishers in the United States anyway will not read books that you just send in. They will not even look at them, they will just throw them away. So you have to do it this way. And the agent, as far as the agent is concerned, the agent wants to find something good, and the agent wants to know that he or she can actually sell the material to a publisher. So you have to pass that bar first. So that's what I did. I was referred to an agent by a mentor of mine, so a woman who has published 7 novels named Sandra Schofield. I consider my personal mentor. And she suggested that I send my work to her agent when she thought it was ready. So this was about year 5. Again, this was the year when I was putting the work out. And it took about 2 more years, excuse me, 2 more years before she thought it was ready. And then the agent got it, and then I rewrote it 3 more times before the agent felt it was ready to submit. So this gives you an idea of just the lengthiness and intensity of the process. And I have to say, because now I mentor students and I sometimes try to get them to agents to help them, they go through exactly the same process. So unless you're Tolstoy or something and it's just coming out like that, you probably will go through a very, very detailed process of revision, and it will take a long time. But the good news is that if you really put your work behind it, you can end up with an actual book. Yeah.
What's been the reception of your books in Iran and also in the Iranian communities, the diaspora?
So the reception of my books in Iran and also in the Iranian communities in the diaspora. So let me start with the diaspora. It's been very important to me to make my books as accurate as possible, culturally, linguistically, in every possible way, historically. So once I get a draft of the book done, I give it to a lot of people in my family so that they can help me correct any mistakes I've made. And I also do a lot of historical research to try to get there. So I would say overall, I think because I make a real big effort in that regard, the reception has been positive in the Iranian diaspora community. At least those who have contacted me have had positive things to say. As far as translation in Iran, my books are not translated into Farsi, and it's a really rocky issue. The problem is the United States has imposed trade sanctions on Iran for various reasons, one of them being that they don't wish Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. And that means that no businesses in the United States can do business legally with businesses in Iran. So my agent normally would work with an agent in another foreign country, and that agent would then go and try to sell my book to publishers in that country. So that's how it has worked. My first book has been translated into 25 languages, so we've been through that process quite a bit. But that's not possible with the Iranian publishers because of the things I mentioned, the trade sanctions and so forth. In addition, unfortunately, the Iranian government has what amounts to a bureau of censorship. So artistic projects and products, including books and films and really everything, have to go through this ministry and receive a seal of approval in order to be published, and have usually certain things cut out, such as sexual content or certain kinds of political content. So I personally don't want my books to be published with changes like that, and so for now it's okay with me that the books are not appearing in Farsi, and I will hope that that will change in the future. The question is, have I written any books in Farsi? And the answer is no. Unfortunately, I'm not good enough in Farsi to be able to actually write a book in Farsi, but I love the idea. Okay, I think I'm getting the signal that we're pretty much at the end of my time, so I would like to say thank you for being such an excellent audience, and thank you very much to the staff of the school, and to Michael in particular for extending such a kind invitation to me to come speak to you today. Thanks again.
So thank you all very much for coming today. Thank you to all the teachers who took time out of your program to bring your students down for this amazing experience. I'd also like to mention that what you guys saw today, if you loved it, which I'm sure you all did, a podcast of this will be available on the library's blog. So if any of your friends or family would like to listen to it as well, you can direct them there so they can take a listen. Also, I would like to thank all the librarians and the admin team for setting this up today. And now I would like to call upon Zara, who's going to come and thank Anita on behalf of the students of Earl Haig. Zara, and if anyone would like to speak directly with Anita or have anything signed, we're going to be meeting in the back room, so if anyone's interested in coming and asking any questions, you're welcome back there to speak with her. So thank you, and everyone else who is not going to ask any questions, you guys can start heading back to class with your teachers. Thank you very much.